we are not rare. But before you leave, you will perceive the lore will be unlocked. You might be stalked by a Sasquatch or a ghost witch, possibly even a ghost that will boast about knowing the Ohio grassman or even the Michigan dogman. Werewolves hunt, poltergeists are up front, but in these backwoods folklore is unlocked.
Welcome back to Folklore Unlocked. I'm Austin, and like always, I'm joined by Ethan.
Yep, hello again, everyone.
And this week, we are moving on from our little Bigfoot excursion to take a look at the Black Dahlia case. And the Black Dahlia herself is Elizabeth Short, who was born on July 29th, 1924, and she was a native of Boston that stood approximately 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighed approximately 115 pounds. She had light blue eyes and brown hair, and she spent her early life between New England and Florida, and this is because she suffered from bronchitis and severe asthma attacks, with her going under lung surgery at age 15. And doctors suggested that she occasionally relocate to a warmer climate, like specifically during winter, which is very cold in New England, so the Boston area, to prevent further respiratory problems. And she spent the next 3 winters in Miami, Florida because of this. And then she also dropped out of Medford High during her sophomore year of high school.
And she had some family problems. So Elizabeth was the third of 5 daughters of Cleo Alvin Short Jr. and Phoebe May Sawyer. Cleo lost most of his savings in the 1929 stock market crash. And then in 1930, his car was found abandoned on the Charlestown Town Bridge, and it was assumed that he jumped from the bridge. And then in 1942, Phoebe received an apology letter from him saying that he was still alive and he had started a new life in California.
Which prompted Elizabeth's first move to California in December 1942 when she was 18. She moved to Vallejo to live with her father, who she hadn't seen since she was 6. And if Vallejo, California sounds familiar, that's because that's what was a big center for the Zodiac Killer, which I believe we do have an episode on the Zodiac Killer, so go watch that if you haven't already. After you finish watching this episode, of course. And arguments between Elizabeth and her father led to her moving out in January 1943. And she took a job at the base exchange at Camp Cook, which she left in mid 1943, and she moved to Santa Barbara after that, where she was arrested for underage drinking.
Then Florida. So she returned to family in Massachusetts after the underage drinking and whatnot, but quickly went to Florida afterwards. And while in Florida, Elizabeth met Major Matthew Michael Gordon Jr., which she told friends that he had written a marriage proposal while recovering from a plane crash in India. She, of course, accepted, but Gordon died in a second plane crash on August 10th, 1945. And then in July of 1946, she again returned to California.
And it was during the move to second second move to California where she lived in Los Angeles, more specifically the Biltmore Hotel. After returning to Los Angeles after a day in San Diego with Robert Red Manley, a 25-year-old married salesman that she'd been seeing on January 9th, 1947. Manley stated that he dropped her off at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, with him also stating that Elizabeth was planning to meet one of her sisters that afternoon. And some accounts report that hotel staff had seen her use the lobby phone, possibly calling the sister that she planned to meet up that afternoon with.
And this kind of fits into other sightings because shortly afterwards, she was allegedly seen by patrons of the Crown Grill Cocktail Lounge at 754 South Olive Street, about 3/8 of a mile from Biltmore. So she could have possibly been meeting with her sister there at the cocktail bar, maybe.
What was a possibility, or they might have saw her on her way to meet her sister. Nothing was ever proven because she was found murdered in the Leimert Park neighborhood of Los Angeles on January 15th. So, about 6 days after her last sighting in 1947, with her body being heavily mutilated and posed. She was completely severed at the waist, drained nearly completely of blood, if not completely, leaving her skin a pallid white, with some flesh being sliced away from her chest and thigh areas.
Some of the body pose, like how it was posed, is the lower half had been positioned a foot away from her upper half since it was cut in half. The intestine had been neatly tucked under her lower half, hands over her head, and elbows at right angles. Then the legs had also been spread apart. And then her face had been cut from the corners of her mouth to her ears, which is also known as the Glasgow smile.
Which you can see an example of the Joker having said Glasgow smile.
I mean, it's the most well known, so I had to put that one in.
Yeah. It's the most well known and the least disturbing.
Yes.
And her autopsy was performed by Frederick Newbar, the Los Angeles County coroner, on January 16th, 1947. So the day after she was found. And he determined that Elizabeth was killed at least 10 hours before she was found, putting her time of death somewhere on the 14th of January 1947, with the killer apparently having washed the body in gasoline, which will come up later as an important detail. And it also showed that she had badly decayed teeth, ligature marks on her ankles, wrist, and neck, so evidence of her being tied up on those body parts, and quote irregular laceration with superficial tissue loss on the right side of her chest.
And an autopsy part 2, just a little bit more. So it was also noted superficial lacerations on her right forearm, left upper arm, and then lower left side of her chest. And she'd been cut in half by a technique taught in the 1930s called the hemicorporectomy, which was probably done after death due to the minimal bruising.
And so I'm going to call it HCP because that is a mile long word.
Yeah.
And she was ID'd quickly because of her previous run-in for underage drinking, with her fingerprints being in the system because of that. And when reporters from the Los Angeles Examiner found out who she was, they contacted her mother, Phoebe Short, initially telling her that Elizabeth had won a beauty contest. And after getting as much information they could from Phoebe, they told her the truth about why they were really calling about Elizabeth and telling Phoebe that Elizabeth had been found murdered. So, very cruel way to learn about your daughter's death.
That's what I was going to say. I'm like, that must have been a roller coaster of a telephone call, being like, oh, she won a beauty contest, to, oh, she's dead.
Yeah, that is cruelty, even for newspapers.
Mm. The Black Dahlia name was received, well, the nickname was received from the newspapers and may have originated from the 1946 film noir The Blue Dahlia. So.
I mean, the Black Dahlia, the Blue Dahlia, close enough to be at least connected.
Yeah.
And further newspaper involvement on January 17th, 1947, that the Los Angeles Times deemed the murder a, quote, sex fiend slaying. And on January 21st, 1947, a person claiming to be the killer called the office of James Richardson of the Los Angeles Examiner to congratulate him on the coverage. And the LA Times deeming the murder a, quote, sex fiend slaying, I mean, quite possible because of the way they found her lower half posed. So, yeah, disgusting, but very well could have been.
The content of the call, he said he'd turn himself in if only the police would pursue him further. And also, they told Richardson to expect some souvenirs of Beth Short in the mail.
And this caller did apparently make good on that promise of the mail, because 3 days later, a suspicious manila envelope was discovered addressed to the Los Angeles Examiners and other Los Angeles papers, with individual words having been cut out and pasted from newspapers. And a message on the face of the envelope read, "Here's Dahlia's belongings, letter to follow." And inside the envelope, it contained Elizabeth's birth certificate, business cards, photographs, names written on pieces of paper, and an address book with the name Mark Hansen on the cover. And here's where the gasoline being used to wash Elizabeth's body comes back around. The packet had been cleaned with gasoline as well, and partial prints were lifted, but they were compromised.
Then there was an alleged self-ending note from the killer. So on March 14th of 1947, an apparent self-ending note was found on Breeze Avenue in Venice, and it read, "To whom it may concern, I have waited for the police to capture me for the Black Dahlia killings, but have not. I am too much of a coward to turn myself in, so this is the best way out for me. I couldn't help myself for that or this. Sorry, Mary."
And there were plenty of suspects. 150 suspects were confirmed, but none produced any arrests. And Orson Welles of War of the Worlds fame was allegedly a suspect. Bugsy Siegel, LA mobster, was also allegedly a suspect. And a possible connection to the unsolved Cleveland torso murders, which was a serial killing that we might get to later down the line, because unsolved serial killers is kind of part of this channel's identity, because we have done the Zodiac Killer and Jack the Ripper again after this episode. Take a look at those. And another suspect that was actually part of the list was George Hodel, but he wasn't known publicly as a potential suspect until after his death in 1999. But he was accused of SAing one of his own daughters and was investigated by one of his sons, who was a police officer, in connection to Elizabeth's death. And he was also a doctor. So he would have the potential to know about the HCP technique.
The impact of all of this was it was one of the most infamous unsolved crimes in not only LA County, but the entire U.S. history, and is also credited by historians as one of the first major crimes in post-World War II America to capture national attention.
And it's also produced some tie-ins to some pop culture. It's produced its own documentaries and related documentaries, as well as Hunter season 4, episode 13, and 2 episodes of American Horror Story that's loosely based on the Black Dahlia killings. And on to our thoughts. Based on the information, I do think the killer or killers, if there's more than one, had to have some medical knowledge to do the HCP actominy. So out of the 3 named alleged suspects, in my opinion, it does seem like Hodel fits the best. But I'm not saying he, in fact, did it. It's just with the information given, his background just seems to fit the square hole.
Yeah, I agree. The information does point to someone having medical knowledge, but I really doubt the self-unaliving note was genuine that was like sent in. If anything, I feel like it was probably a way to try to get the police off their back because it's like, oh, I'm taking myself out. You don't have to worry about finding me anymore, kind of thing. Uh, but
Yeah,
either
yeah,
way,
that also just seems like too easy of a way out. Somebody who does something that brutal will not take the coward's way out.
that and it's not like they were on to them at all. Like I could understand if they might have had like they've been on to the killer and he's like, "Oh, they're going to find me. I might as well go out my way," kind of thing. But they didn't even find like they had some suspects, but they didn't have like any like credible information.
Exactly. There wasn't any definitive proof saying one way or the other this person is the square that fits the square cutout here.
Yeah.
But I think that's all we got for this week, and we'll be taking a look at. Let me see what we're taking a look at the Lane Bryant shooting next week. So join us next week with that. Any last words, Ethan?
Just thanks for watching, everyone.
Well, thanks for watching. If you're on YouTube, drop us a like, comment, and subscribe. If you're on Spotify, drop us a follow and a comment, and we'll see you next week.
Yep. Bye, everyone.
You might wake up beside Spearfinger with an extended visit from Jack the Ripper. But if you're lucky, it'll be an angel on that range hill of Louisiana. You might meet Mary Laveau or the Road. At Folklore Unlocked, Austin and Ethan concoct their theory of the eerie and unexplained around the world, sometimes even the underworld. The lore is locked behind secrets, but folklore is meant to be unlocked. The Sokaloo is haunting NC as well as Tennessee. There are many giants that might be clients of the Dark Watchers, who might have psychokinesis. And the phantom time hypothesis is like the phoenix, coming back around again and again. The laser strain on your brain if you've got more than 2 brain cells in you. Some believe McCartney's dead because they read into the Mandela effect, which is subject